Okay, let's get started. If I talk about this loud, can everybody hear me here? So I don't have to use the amplifier? Okay, welcome to Brodhead. How many people, is this your first trip to Brodhead? Congratulations. You finally made the program. Okay. Now we're going to do the opposite, which is, how many people have made 10 trips to Brodhead before? Okay. How many people have made 15? Maybe 20? Okay. And if you're in the 20 club, you're doing pretty good. I would guess that I'm probably in the 20 club. How many people are going on to Oshkosh from here? Good. That includes me too. This, I've always said, is eating dessert before you go have liver and onions for dinner. If I win the lottery, which is unlikely because I will not win because I don't buy tickets, but theoretically if I did win the lottery, I always tell people you would not see me at Oshkosh, but I would still go to Brodhead. And there's value to both of them, but if this is your first trip here, this is sort of a renewal to like what is good about grassroots aviation. I assume that you're building a Pietenpol or some other type of light plane that's sort of complementary to that idea. And personally, when I go to Oshkosh, there's stuff to see and people to know and things to do, but it never sort of like floats my boat like coming here. When I come here and I walk around, I look at stuff and I think, God, I gotta build something. You know, it doesn't, at Oshkosh, I think, you know, I walk around and think, who's got money for this stuff? You know, when I got started in aviation 29 years ago, the thing that people would say is, who buys that stuff? Airline pilots? Now you walk around with airline pilots at Oshkosh and they say, who buys this stuff? Hedge fund managers? So there's the escalation of expensive stuff. And if you go to Oshkosh, one of the things that people look at is a phrase that I coined a lot of years ago is a wealth of products for the wealthy, right? And the reason why that exists is a very simple answer. It's very easy to design something that a person with too much money will spend money on. And it's very hard to design something that is practical, that regular people will invest their own money in. Very cute dog, right? all right. So, the quintessential comparison is you go to Oshkosh and you can walk around and take a look at any product at Oshkosh. And 80 years from now, do you think any single product that they are introducing at Oshkosh will still be alive on the planet? No. All the stuff that at Oshkosh that you look at has if it even comes to the marketplace, has a very short lifespan. It's a lot of consumer goods. Most of the stuff that you see at Oshkosh, where will it be in 5 years? Or 10 years at the most? That's right, it'll be at the bottom of landfill, keeping copies of, you know, People magazine with the Kardashians in it, and used diapers company for all eternity. But that's where, like, the, you know, all the early GPSs went, all the other crap. But if you take a look at it, there are Pietenpols here that have been flying for decades. And so you think, you want to invest your hours in aviation in something, you want to invest in something lasting. And something lasting would be a Pietenpol. If you want to have a consumer experience, you can go to Oshkosh and do that. Now, there's some good things about Oshkosh. You need a parent organization to protect your fundamental interest in aviation today. It's good to have a big tent. It's good to have political power. It's good to have stuff with government contacts, and it's always been that way. But you got to have a focused idea of what the heck you're doing in aviation, what floats your boat. Now, I like Corvair motors. I've done Corvair motors for 29 years. It's the only thing I'm really particularly good at. But in general, I like all kinds of airplanes. I like everything about Pietenpols. I like the Bernard Pietenpol story. He's the patron saint of all home building. Everything you ever needed to learn about aviation, you can learn it in a microcosm by studying the life of Bernard Pietenpol. If you've just read basic fundamental stuff about Bernard Pietenpol, let me say that like most of the man's depth and character exists far beyond the stuff that is written about him. There's a pretty good treasure trove of stuff of people who knew him. How many people here met Vi Kapler? All right, me included. Vi Kapler, young man, worked with Bernard, knew him in his later years, and obviously knew the entire story better than any other person that you could talk to. I was myself privileged to learn some of the stuff from Vi. It took about 10 years of coming here before one day he said to me in the morning, would you like to go down to McDonald's? And we went and sat at McDonald's on a Sunday morning where it was kind of drizzly, and sat there and for a couple of hours, and he shared a lot of things about Brodhead Pietenpol, and it reinforced to me that the depth of the man's character far exceeded anything that you regularly read in magazines. So I encourage you, as you're building this man's design, to get to know the man also. There's a lot to be studied in that, and there's a lot of stuff to learn. The most common tenet that people say in life is, you should simplify your life and do that. How many people have you met in the last year who told you that, but weren't exercising it themselves? About 100% of the people who told you that. But if you look at the life of Brodhead Pietenpol, he's making the airplane simpler and simpler as it goes. How many people, when it was here for about a 10-year span, saw the last original? Okay? If you look at it in detail, it is a much simpler airplane than the 1933 plans show. It's cleaner and smaller and lighter in a lot of detailed ways. Very interesting design study on how to make an airplane simpler and simpler. It was not getting more complex every time. You can look at a lot of light airplanes, and very few light airplanes do that over time. But Brodhead Pietenpol understood something. How many people have been over to Cherry Grove? All right. Cherry Grove, his hometown that he selected to live in, would fit in this parking lot right here. Okay? I think it has a dozen structures in it, at the most. Very, very small town. The man selected to live in simplicity and make his life simpler and simpler overall. He was the one guy, and you can't meet him now, but you can study his life and his design, and he will teach you over and over that the best things that you'll experience in light aviation are not the use of high technology, it's the fundamental things of flight. Now, if we go to Oshkosh, one of the things you're going to hear is, the first thing people are going to talk about, which makes me nauseous when I hear it, is ADS-B in and out. Nothing captures the romance of flight to me like a guy saying, no, you can buy this little kit and it's got ADS-B in and out. And I'm thinking, if I hear you say that one more time, I'm going to be nauseous, all right? The type of stuff that I'm interested in flying in is fundamental stuff that you experience right here at Brodhead. The real value of brass flying and all of this stuff. And last year at Oshkosh, when they were going off about this entire thing about ADS-B in and out will make flying safe. And I thought, that's really so fundamentally wrong that to say that you have an electronic thing that will make flying safe at that point. And also the guy said, I can't imagine people not wanting to fly without this. Person giving a presentation said, can't imagine somebody wanting to fly without ADS-B in and out. And I was like Charles Lindbergh. If he came back from the grave, he'd look at this and think, why did I waste all my time in the Spirit of St. Louis and all that flying and all the flying in World War II and everything? I didn't have ADS-B in and out. What a waste my life was. So, if you want to find out what isn't a waste, you're at the right location. And you're surrounded by other people who've discovered this a little earlier than you and are working their way through it if you're new to this. I've got a couple people in the room who have friends of mine who have Pietenpols. Bob Lester, stand up for a second. Round of applause for Bob Lester, who flew here from Florida. Bob has Corvair powered Pietenpol. his bird has over 800 hours on it of flying. So if you want to know what is worthwhile to do, it is build the airplane, it is worth flying. There are an awful lot of airplane designs where the high time aircraft, after 10 years of some particular design, about 150 hours. What does it tell you? One, you should have a new underwear collection if you fly it, if it's a dangerous airplane. There are plenty of airplanes that look great and everything, have the handling qualities that will, are not to be desired. But you look at a Pietenpol, and a well-built Pietenpol like Bob's, that's in CG, has a reliable motor, works really well, can be flown all over the country. Bob's flown up here. You were here in 2015 also?
Yeah, by way of Minnesota.
By way of Minnesota.
I flew over Jericho, and they didn't mow the grass.
So, something good? The next gentleman, Kevin Brodhead, stand up and take a bow, Kevin. He has flown here a number of times, 4 times. Just flew up from Texas. He has been the co-host of 4 or 5 Corvair colleges. 5. Okay. The host of the colleges, Shelley, stand up and take a bow. If you've signed up online for one of our Corvair colleges, or you plan on signing up online, you are a recipient of Shelley's intelligence and generosity for her setting all that stuff up and running that stuff remotely for us. They have co-hosted 5 Corvair colleges in Texas and been a very, very important asset to the world of Pietenpols in general, but specifically Corvair-powered Pietenpols. So thank you very much. In the back row, I wanted to introduce Terry Hand. Terry, stand up for a second. This is Terry. If he said something that was kind of smart-alecky to you, or gave you a sharp or witty response on the internet, or anything,
and I can
like
do
that,
it after the meeting if you didn't get
I
it
want it
before.
clearly understood. He's just my friend. I don't endorse anything that he says. Great guy. What Terry does for us is, how many people are aware that I have a Pietenpol discussion group with approximately 100 members, and all it discusses is Pietenpols and Corvairs? Okay. Good. Terry runs that, moderates it, and makes the entire thing work. Part of the reason why it's a very, very important database is that it's been screened of all the material on it that is factual and useful. So it has just the stuff without the regular internet stuff of old wives' tales, half-baked ideas, and dangerous poop, right? So, round of applause to thank Terry for... Okay. Where's Shad?
Probably.
Okay. Shad Bell was here. Shad was telling us he has almost 500 hours on his Corvair-powered Pietenpol. That's out there. That is the orange and blue one. Been out here probably half a dozen times, I think. We have Randy Bush. Stand up and take a bow so everybody can see you, Randy. Randy's Corvair-powered Sonics is here. But over the years, if you've come here many times, Randy's Corvair-powered Pietenpol has about 800 hours on it. Yeah, about 800 hours of flight time on it. It's been here a number of times. So when you look at guys like Randy and Bob who have 800 hours on their airplane, if you look at it and think other people built these and they didn't utilize them or whatever, the devil's in the details. But if you have the airplane correct in weight and balance, and you have all of the stuff right, it's a highly useful airplane. You can fly it all over the country if you want. So the difference is, you look at some airplanes, and how many times have you seen on how many people have seen an airplane on barnstormers, like a Pietenpol or some other airplane that's completely done, but nobody's flown it? Have you ever seen that before? You think, what are the odds that the guy built the entire airplane and completed it and had it ready for FAA sign-off and was planning on flying it all over the country, and then decided that day he just didn't want to ever do that? Or do you think like somebody came and looked at it and said, sure looks like a pretty paint job, you almost covered up about the 10 fatal flaws that you installed in the airplane? And he said, well, the ethical thing to do would be sell this to somebody I'll never meet. So there are airplanes like that. How many people have seen seen a Pietenpol on Barnstormers or somewhere else that has gotten airworthiness certificate for 5 years and it has 12 hours on it? You ever seen one of those? Okay, I can look at some of those photographs, and with what I know about weight and balance on Pietenpols, I can look at it and say, it's got a 65 Continental on it, it's got vertical Cobain struts on it, and from those two pieces of data alone, I can look at it and tell you that with a 140-pound pilot, it's out of the aft end of the CG envelope, right? So they probably put a 180 or 200-pound guy in it and scared the poo-poo out of themselves, because it has horrible flying characteristics when you're flying at a couple inches behind the aft limit. So that airplane, instead of somebody saying, wow, I should have read those weight and balance articles and I should have paid some attention to that instead of the people who were on the Matronics the Matronics Pietenpol list, wow, I should have read that. They think, wow, what happens here is we need to sell this to somebody else. So contrast those two experiences with too dangerous for a first flight, not worth flying more than 12 hours in 5 years, and then you look at two guys who each have 800 hours. Who are you going to use for a model when you're going through your plan to build and fly your airplane? You know, the choice is whether or not you get to the point where you're standing here 8 years from now with 800 hours on your airplane or not, is basically who do you follow for a mentor in this stuff? And there are choices to be made on that. And that's basically how aviation works. So we could talk a lot about details and nuts and bolts and engines and everything, but a lot of the stuff involves good decision making. You know, if you have a pilot's license, there's actually a section of the training that your CFI had to go through, and it's called decision making. And they change the nomenclature on it every now and then, but it's important that this section, which I should argue is the most important thing you will ever learn from aviation that applies to the building of the airplane and the operating of it, is the section that's largely ignored. But when I give a forum, I always want to give a nod to the idea that the difference in the experience being a failure after many years of building where it's too dangerous to fly or hardly worth flying and having 800 hours on it is all falls under the category of was it bad luck that did that? No. Was it, an act of God? Well, maybe if you were dropped on your head when you were little and don't make good decisions. But for the most part, it's a human error in people either being cheap or following people that they like. Now, no, you're not a positive role model. I don't want anybody to think that I was just implying in that speech that Bob Lester is a positive role model in any way, shape, or form. All right, that would be a mistake. He's a great friend, but he's not a positive role model. If you have children here, don't let them talk about him. He tells great stories that children are captivated by, but you'll have to deal with the consequences. So it's about decision making on where you end up on the other and what you get out of the hours that you spend in this stuff. You become like fairly educated on how airplanes are built, does the stuff work? It's all about who you follow. Now, I'm going to digress just one small bit before we get into the technical stuff, right? One of the things that I want to teach people that I don't get enough chance to explain to people is this. We've all been subjected to horrible terms in the national discussion like identity politics, right? And you hear all of that stuff. Why does that stuff play a role in our political lives? Because it works. That's why. I have two members of the family who each work on Team A and Team B, and they work in polling, and they know this stuff. And what they know is that people will listen to somebody who they like the way they look. They will listen to somebody who they think they identify with. What people are no good at is listening to somebody who may be right, who doesn't look like the job, who doesn't say things that they're agreeing with. People aren't any good at that. So what they want is, they want reinforcement for everything. So if you start in building your airplane, and you got a couple of ideas in your head about wood, what's a good value on something, and you just seek out people to give you the affirmation that the answer that you came into with is right. Will you find them? That's the magic of it. You'll always find someone to agree with you. The trick of actually getting good in aviation and knowledgeable is adopting the mindset that most people have abandoned. And the mindset that you have to adopt is, I'm building an airplane. I like being alive. I want to be successful at this. And above all, my airplane has a passenger seat. And somebody's going to sit in the passenger seat of the airplane. Right? And when you're going to take your first passenger for your first flight, that person's going to look you in the face and say, the FAA said you're one of the special people on the planet. You have a private pilot's license. You must be endowed with better judgment than other people. I mean, how many people here have a private pilot's license or better? Right? Great. When you go to family gatherings and the rest of the family looks at you, they think, or maybe cocktail parties or whatever it is, you drop the pilot thing on them, you know, along the way, and they think, well, he must be a special guy, you know, and they don't really understand that your pilot's license came from Oklahoma City, and it didn't really say that you had great judgment. It just said that you passed a bunch of hoops, right? But if you're building an airplane, the thing that you got with a passenger seat is you're going to have a passenger in that airplane one day, and that passenger's going to look at you in the face when they're getting into your airplane. And what are they looking at you for? Are they looking at you and thinking, did you do a good job building this? Did you do the best job you could? And you don't want to have to look at that person and say, here's a disclaimer. I did the best job I could listening to people who agreed with me about everything. I did the best job I could, but I only took advice from people I liked. I did the best job I could with the limited information available to me because I tuned everything out with people who I didn't like the car they drove, the shirt they wore, the part of the country they were from, how they talked to people, any of the stuff. So from that limited basis, you might have to look at your passenger and say, I guess I didn't use all the available data. I just used the data on a little tiny subset. And if you were honest, you would have to say, you shouldn't get in that seat. In fact, I shouldn't fly the airplane. In fact, I did a bad job of decision making because I didn't use all the information available to me. The best example of this is one of the least savory characters I have ever met. Not just in aviation, in life. A guy named Dennis Long, right? Oddly and characteristically, odd characteristic is, if you had me name the top 3 people I learned more about building light airplanes from than anybody else, I would have to include Dennis Long in there. Now, a lot of people, when they met Dennis Long at the Spruce Creek Airport, immediately said, what an a-hole, right? And, you know, just a terrible guy. And you know what? They were absolutely right. He was a terrible human being. I wouldn't have wanted him as a dad, a father-in-law. I wouldn't have wanted him in any sense. But he had... Dennis Long had an incredible collection of airplanes in his hangar. He had a 0 altitude waiver for aerobatics. He really knew how to fly airplanes. He really knew how to build them. He had a bunch of hit specials, like you couldn't believe how well built they were, all done by his own hand. His covering work was incredibly good, all of the stuff. He was an absolute jerk to people. He was an absolute jerk. But I looked at him and said, this is my craft, and I don't care how big a jerk he is, he knows a lot of stuff that I want to know. And I won't put up with too much from him, but I'm going to be as available as I can to learn everything I possibly can from him. And there was a ton of stuff to learn. And when he found out that I was really only there to learn what he knew, he shared a lot of the stuff with me about that. But I looked at it, and plenty of people said to me, my God, what a jerk that guy is. I can't believe you ever go over to his hangar, or that you volunteer and spend time over there, or that he taught you any of that stuff. I would never put up with that. And I thought, sure hope your airplane doesn't have a passenger seat in it, because mine's going to, and I'll be able to look my passenger in the face and say, I would have taken advice from Satan himself, and I almost did. I would have taken advice from Satan himself if it kept my passenger safe. So that's the important thing. So as you're going through the building process, the important feature of building is decision making, and when you're making decisions, you've got to get beyond the idea of only taking advice from sources that agree with you or look like they know what they're talking about. You have to go to sources that, even if they're offensive to you, even if you dislike them, it's all physics. You need to learn the stuff of how it works. If you learn how it works from a person who's nice, that's great. But if you don't know it, you got to learn it from somebody who's maybe the only guy available is a Dennis Long type character. Maybe some horrible grease monkey mechanic from Florida. Who doesn't have long hair anymore, so you can't use that excuse. But the part of it is that you got to be disciplined with yourself, and if you ever kind of forget that, go out and look at the passenger seat in your airplane and think, I'm going to have somebody sit in that one day, so I really got to learn this stuff. All right? Now let's talk a little bit about motors. Teledyne Continental motors. You can go right down to Mobile, Alabama, and argue that with the CEO of Teledyne Continental. Engines, power plants, mills. All right. Here is where, if you're a Corvair guy or woman and you want to start with your project, this is where everybody starts. This is my conversion manual. It is the complete book on how you convert a Corvair motor into an aircraft power plant and operate it. I'm going to pass around a couple of copies of this. In the front 20 pages, you can see pictures of a bunch of milestone airplanes and engines that we put together in the last 29 years of me doing this. Now, I got a confession to make. When I first started doing this, I thought, I actually went and saw Bert Rutan and saw him, and I thought, he looks pretty smart. It's going to take me at least 10 years to get to the point where he is, but I'm a hard worker, so maybe it'll take 8. And I thought, you know, I used to work in the hangar and wrench on the original Corvair motors we were doing, and I thought, it's quiet out. I should probably practice my acceptance speech for being the president of the EAA, because that just is inevitable, because this is such a great idea. All right? So it hasn't quite materialized quite that fast, but it is a very, very popular idea. It is the sole means that I use for work for the last 20 years. There's a wealth of information in here. The stuff that's in the book involves a lot of testing. I graduated from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Impresses people who didn't go there. But I put in an awful lot of hard work and research. But also contained in the book are an enormous amount of lessons. Some were from great days and some were from terrible days in aviation. There's a lot of information beyond just a pure nuts and bolts, this is the torque of that nut information. There's a lot of stuff in here about decision making. So, how many people own a copy of the conversion manual already? All right, good. For the people who don't own one, you can take a look through it and read the stuff. But it's a lot of fundamental information from the perspective of how much can you learn. Now, we're going to go to Oshkosh, right? And by comparison, there'll be a lot of airplanes there where the person's goal was, how do I get this done as fast as possible? Now, if we walked out here and looked at a plans-built Pietenpol, you could ask the person with the plans-built Pietenpol any question about the airplane, and they could recall putting it together, and they would tell you the pros and cons and why they chose to do it that particular way. You can go to Oshkosh and ask the same questions as somebody who built a super quick build kit and used the factory assisted help and then did this and that and had their buddies help out and wrote a lot of checks. The person doesn't know anything about the airplane. Their goal wasn't to learn. It was to see how fast they could get it done, which is a translation for how little can I learn? How much money can I spend and how little can I learn? The converse of this is a Pietenpol is a really good example of the approach of someone who says, I got into aviation to find out how much I could learn, not how little. Okay? Now, the one thing that I got from Embry-Riddle is my degree is in professional aeronautics. The most common craft of somebody who's got a degree in professional aeronautics from Embry-Riddle is accident investigation. Right? So I got an awful lot of time around accident investigation. How many people have actually read start to finish an entire accident report written by the FAA or NTSB? They're pretty detailed. Right after name, rank, and serial number and all that stuff, there's a really important box that determines how a lot of this stuff is done. And the number they want, is there a box there that says total amount of hours the pilot has? Are they interested in that? No. Are they interested in like total amount of hours on the airplane? Sometimes, but not frequently. What is the number that they're interested in?
Number of fatalities.
Not always, because they have great interest in some accidents that have no fatalities.
Time and type?
The time and type. Who said time and type? Okay. This is important. When you look at an accident report, the first thing the investigator wants to know is, how many hours did this guy have flying this type of airplane? And if the answer is 1, I'll tell you that they are no longer looking for a mechanical problem in the airplane. Right? If the answer is 100, now they're looking for a mechanical problem. You understand the difference? And the difference is that, let's compare again, somebody at Oshkosh whose goal was to own the airplane and learn as little as possible as they could do it, with somebody versus out here on the field, and their goal was to enjoy building the airplane and become a really knowledgeable owner-operator of it, right? The difference between the two approaches when you talk about important statistics is that you could go to any airport you want, and I've been going to airports for 30 years, and you can talk to a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of old grizzled guys and everything. And there's one, and they've probably seen darn near everything in aviation, right? What's the one thing that nobody's ever seen in aviation, no matter like how old, and the guy may look like a leather saddlebag and have his old worn out A2 flying jacket and remember flying radials and everything. You can ask that guy, what's he never seen? He's never seen anybody hurt in an airplane because they knew too much about it, were too smart about it, too well informed, and too well trained, right? So the idea of somebody consciously making a decision to learn as little as possible about the airplane they're operating, well, they're headed on that way to somebody filling out a box on their behalf, right? Versus if you become the super knowledgeable operator of your own aircraft because you built it and you were the master of it, not just the owner, the master of the airplane, and that was part of your mindset and good decision making, nobody's ever going to fill out a form on you. And that's the difference. So a lot of people say, well, how do I buy safety? We go back to the ADSB in and out. If you have this, flying is safe. No, it's not. Flying is made safe by knowing things and exercising good judgment. That's what makes flying safe. Nobody was ever hurt by knowing too much and making too good decisions. That's never happened, never will. Right? So, let's pass this around. If you haven't seen it, take a look inside. And, okay, what am I doing writing a book about how to put a Corvair motor together? All right? The whole goal of doing this and teaching people about motors is because the same thing that applies to the airframe, the same idea that applies to the airframe, the more you know, the more enjoyable it is, but also the better, more skilled owner-operator you are, you're headed towards a much more rewarding experience. You're much more likely to be an 800-hour guy than a 12-hour airplane owner or one that never flew. All of these things are to your advantage. But if they're really true about airframes, boy oh boy are they true about engines, right? So, to preserve the same way that everybody understands the idea of the plans-built airplane gives you a much better education than the super quick build, factory assist, 10 days build to fly program. That doesn't create an airplane builder. That doesn't create anything other than future job security for people who work for federal agencies that look at piles of aluminum, right? What we have to preserve here is the idea that there is somebody who wants to teach you all you could possibly learn about a light airplane engine. How to put it together, how to intelligently operate it, all of the stuff that you wanted to learn about this, we have in a format. Now, I've been a Chevy guy my whole life, right? Corvair is a Chevrolet product. But I had never owned one before I went and got one to go put it in an airplane. I knew what one was, and I looked at it, but I didn't pick my favorite engine for this. I picked the best engine that fit the idea. Now, is it the best engine in the entire world that's ever turned a propeller? No, I'm not going to argue that. A PT6 probably is. But if you look at it, I knew right from the get-go that what I was going to do was teach people about a motor. And if you're going to teach people about a motor, you need a very, very reliable, very simple engine to work with as the physical representation of what you have learned, what I can teach you about this. Now, you look at it and people are like, well, you wrote a book, are you a genius about engines? No, I'm a genius about engines in this sense. I was smart enough when I was 26 years old and confronted by a jerk like Dennis Long to realize that guy had a lot to learn. I could learn a lot from him. All along the way, the book represents the accumulated knowledge of me sitting down and saying, I will put away all my preconceived notions and learn from a whole host of people that I encounter, and then I will test and validate those things along the way and find out how applicable they are. That's what's rewarding about my career in aviation. If you want to spend 2,000 hours building an airplane, you better have a pretty good idea about what rewarding is, because if you get to the other end of 2,000 hours in the garage and maybe $10,000 or $15,000 spent, and you want to go out and fly for 800 hours and you want to think that that time was worthwhile that you spent, go into it with an idea of like what you want to get out of it. And the answer better be, what I want to get out of it is everything I could possibly learn. So here we have an engine that is air-cooled, horizontally opposed, 6-cylinder engine, readily available with parts. We hold Corvair colleges all over the country. We teach people about this stuff. It is readily available to you to come and learn everything that you wanted to know about engines, and then utilize that to fly your own airplane, your own 800 hours of adventure, but do so not thinking, I hope this works today. You do so saying, I know it will work today, I understand how it functions, and I put it together myself. That's what we have to offer. It's it dovetails perfectly with the attitude of building a Pietenpol, which is a plans-built airplane, essentially. So that's how it works together, and that was my goal originally. One of the tough things is, I go and cover in September. How many people have ever been to the Zenith Open House in Mexico, Missouri? Okay, I've got a bunch of people here. Some of you I've seen there before. I go to the Zenith Open House. They offer a very rapid-to-build airplane. Inside the amount of people that like Zenith airplanes, because they are well designed, right, are a small subset of people who want to learn everything that they can. Right? In that subset, we do very well with Corvairs on there. But that's not. But if you look at Zenith, they are representative of the EAA community as a whole. And there are very many people who want to just say, how quick can I build it? Aren't interested in what they can learn. What can I buy to put in it? And the ever popular, Does it come with ADSB or can I buy that? Because I need it to be safe. So the important part of this is deciding that here you are in the majority. If you're building a Pietenpol, you're in the majority of, this is where the majority of people want to learn something. So that's what we're doing here. Okay, what I want to do, how many people have seen, we have 4 Corvair powered airplanes out there. Did everybody get a look at the engines and hear them run and take a look at it? Good. What I want to do is just have you guys ask a bunch of questions, and I'll answer any question that you have on the engine and give you a little bit of background on the hows and whys of that. Who here has a question that I can answer from the floor? Shoot.
I messaged you once on Facebook that I purchased the Corvair engine that was built years ago with your early man.
Yes.
I have the parts list and the notes that I used, pictures during the build, but it has the hub that you designed, put on the front.
Right on the crank, yeah.
And it says it had no fifth bearing, so I should probably take it apart and put it together myself so I know what's in the engine. But what do is it better to have the fifth bearing, line board installed, or to purchase the one that goes on the front? I haven't started this part of the project.
Question is a fifth bearing. How many people here have not heard the term fifth bearing before? Have not. Okay? A fifth bearing on a Corvair, Corvairs have 4 main bearings from the factory. To take the load applied to the engine, we install a 5th main bearing on the end of the case. And that 5th bearing is actually bolted on. It is not on board, it is not assembled in that way. It is actually retrofittable to an existing engine. That's one of the unique features of 5th bearings. Brodhead Pietenpol never saw a 5th bearing in his entire life. They built and flew an awful lot of Corvairs without 5th bearings. One of the characteristics of why everyone needs a 5th bearing these days is, one, Brodhead Pietenpol on several occasions went to a junkyard and got a Corvair motor that had 5,000 miles on it, and he went there and carefully picked one that had a factory nitrided crankshaft. Then he put a really light propeller on the front, and the man knew how to fly very, very well. And he never let the motor detonate or have any other problem, right? So that's where the track record of not needing a 5th bearing came from. Where the track record of why it switches about 15 years ago to needing a 5th bearing is, one, we get much higher power output out of the engines than traditionally was done before. But the most crucial factor is that there are no 5,000 mile engines in junkyards. Every single Corvair motor, all the ones that you see out there, were entirely overhauled and converted. Every piece in it was addressed. There is no just taken out of a car and stuck in the airplane. There is none of that anymore. So every part had to be addressed. How many people are familiar with the concept of grinding a crankshaft? It's done in all internal combustion engines. Crankshaft grinding is a bit of an art. 50 years ago, in every small town in America, you could have a crankshaft grinder do a perfect job on a crankshaft, and it would be great. Today in America, many super talented machine shop skills, like crank grinding, have disappeared from a national level. The machines still exist, and there are people who own the machine, but they don't know what they're doing. So if you have a local guy grind the crankshaft, like the motor that you got, where the crankshaft came from matters. Why it matters is that if you use a crankshaft grinder on a crankshaft incorrectly, you can put a stress riser in it like you won't believe, and that will overstress the crankshaft. If you have a 5th bearing on it, that characteristic of the crank being able to tolerate a stress riser is much higher. But the best thing is to combine a 5th bearing and a properly ground crankshaft, and then you have an incredibly good track record of not having crank issues with it. Now the dilemma is engines for sale, right? there are engines that come to Corvair colleges, and I look at it and say, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but that's a little piece of trash. The guy who ground your crankshaft, all he did was put stress risers around each edge. I don't really want you to assemble that. Your rod bearings, your rod bolts in that, you punch those out and drove those back in, that'll never work. All Corvair motors that we build all have ARP rod bolts in them for a reason. Go through all this stuff. I'll tell the guy, I don't really want to dampen your day. The guy will say, thank God you told me this, because I was going to fly my grandkids in this engine. And you're a good guy, William Wynne. Thanks. I'm going to take this home. I'm going to put it in my own dumpster. I don't even want to fill up the dumpster here. I'm a little embarrassed. I'm going to take this thing home. I'm going to watch it melted down myself, so that nobody's grandkid gets it. Some of these speeches are really great and everything. Okay, on about 50% of the cases, on Barnstormer appears Corvair motor, inspected by William Wynne, assembled at Corvair College, for sale. People will sell stuff like that all the time.
Oh, he didn't claim it, I just got the book there.
Well, so stuff that's for sale is for sale for a reason. Here, my wife's Tailorcraft has a C85-12 on the front end of it. Plenty of people are familiar with C85s, great aircraft engine. 20 years ago, rebuilding it, it had about $12,000 in parts 20 years ago in it. And it had the free labor of me assembling it, right? Now, there are plenty of people who say, I'm going to go to Oshkosh, and in Oshkosh, in the Fly Mart, I saw it for $3,500, a C85. It says it's really great, and I'm going to buy that. And I thought, if you came to Florida and said, I'd like to buy the engine off the front end of the Tailorcraft, and you said I had $10,000 in cash, I wouldn't sell it to you because I couldn't reproduce it for that, right? And you could say to the guy, now, if I wouldn't sell it to you for $10,000 in Florida, why would I put it in the back of my pickup truck and drive it all the way to Oshkosh and drop it off at the Fly Mart and sell it for $3,500 if it was the equivalent engine? And the answer is, they both might be C85-12s, but they're not the equivalent engine. The type of engine that people take to a Fly Mart and sell, or quite frequently the engine that people put on Barnstormers, is the engine that they want to sell to somebody they'll never see again, And it's appalling. How many people were fans of the original show, The Twilight Zone? Okay, here's my favorite Twilight Zone of all time. Guy comes with a box, right? He goes to the young married couple's house. You remember this? The box has a button on the top. And he said, here's the box, and you're going to get $1 million if you press that button in the next hour. You remember this one? $1 million if you press the button in the next hour. And the young married couple is thinking $1 million. And he says, if you press the button, somebody you never met, that you'll never meet, never know, no consequences, they're going to die. They could be an inch away from dying right now. They could be in a nursing home. Might even be merciful if you did this. But if you press that button, you get $1 million, and somebody you never met is going to die. Sound familiar? Anybody see this? Okay. So, couple has an argument going back and forth for the full hour of like all the things that would improve in their lives, and you heard them say that it's, they could be dying anyway and everything. They go back and forth. At the last moment, they're having an argument, they're holding their hands over it. At the last moment, they both press the button with like 30 seconds to go. Guy walks in, got a giant briefcase, got $1 million in it. Puts the $1 million on the table, they're overjoyed, they're hugging the money, they think it's great. And he walks over and picks up the box like this. He puts it under her arm, and they said, sir, where are you going? And he said, I'm going to take this box to another young married couple, and you better pray to God they're better people than you. Right? And that's my favorite Twilight Zone, because I have a sick sense of humor. Right? Now, that was a great Twilight Zone, right? But it goes on every day with reselling of planes, projects, engines, all sorts of stuff. And what those people are doing is saying, not good enough for my grandkids, not good enough for my grandkids, perfectly fine for your grandkids. And that is an attitude that I don't just have a problem with. I have a serious problem with people who behave that way. That's not an acceptable. When people don't treat other people like human beings, I'll teach them what not being treated like a human being is about, so they get a much better idea about it. We had a Zenith guy. A couple people said they were at Zenith's open house. We had a Zenith builder. Got an engine, completely built, test run, bought it. A lot of stories about how he's going to fly his grandkids in it and straight and everything. Puts it on the front end of his Zenith 750. He flies it for 10 hours on the front end of the airplane. He pulls it back off the front end of the airplane, never calls me or anything. And how I find out about it is, I got a call from a guy in Miami named Ramesh Nori. Ramesh Nori says, I just bought one of your engines. I said, who'd you buy it from? And he said, I'll use his name because I got no problem using people's names who are unethical people. He said, I bought it from Roger Grable, right? Okay, Roger Grable sold it to him. I said, why'd you buy it, Ramesh? And he said, it was for sale for half price. He said, I bought it for 5,000 bucks. And I said, good, okay. I called Roger Grable and said, okay, Roger, tell me why you took the engine off the front end of your airplane, right? Now, characteristically, notice that he didn't know anything about it because I said to him, I'll build the engine for you, but you got to come to a Corvair college. You got to learn about this stuff. I want you to be educated about it. Never found time to read the book. Never followed anything on the website. Really didn't learn anything. He just wanted to buy it, right? I never should have sold it to him. But he put it on the front end of his airplane, and he flew it for 10 hours, all right? He never once tested the mixture control in the carburetor. I said, did you ever pull the mixture control out to find out if it ran good? No, I was not above 10,000 feet. You never have to use mixture control below 10,000 feet. But that's interesting. He learned that from somebody who agreed with him. You understand? So he sold it to Ramesh Nori. And I said, what was the problem? He said, well, the engine was icing the carburetor all the time. And I said, it's July, and you live in Missouri. It wasn't icing the carburetor all the time. He says, yes, it was. And what it was is he had the carburetor on his engine was set way too rich. He would have known this had he ever pulled the mixture control out, but we all know that you don't use mixture control below 10,000 feet, right? Never did that, never called us, never did anything. He just decided it was too dangerous to operate. Had a false premise that said, it's icing the carburetor. Found somebody at the airport to agree with him. Probably someone he liked the way they looked, right? Went through the entire thing. Sold it to Ramesh Nori. Ramesh Nori takes the engine, comes up to the next Corvair college and says, can I see it run? I was like, yeah, we're gonna run it, we're gonna look at it. Engine runs perfectly. Roger Grable sold the carburetor to a different person. But if you sell Corvair parts in America, I got news for you. I can get them all back, right? I got the Corvair carburetor back from a guy in Baton Rouge he sold it to. Took the carburetor apart, it's got the wrong jet in it. He had some guy rebuild it, and it has a jet that would be appropriate for an 0290. All right. It was just simply too rich. It wasn't icing at all, right? So he sells it to Ramesh Nori. Ramesh Nori now has a half-off engine, works great. He's excited about it. We run it, it's great. I called Roger Grable back and said, why'd you sell it? And he said, well, I have to fly my grandkids in this airplane. I have to fly my grandkids and it's important and I gotta have a safe engine. And I said, well, here's a link to YouTube and you can see the engine running perfectly. There was nothing wrong with it. I said, okay. And he said, well, I guess we're friends and it'll be okay. I was like, no, we're not friends at all. And he said, I didn't rip that guy off. I sold it to him, I sold him the engine, and I sold it to him for $4,800 plus the shipping on it. I gave him a really good deal, and I got half my money back. All right? That was a half-ethical thing to do, because what he was doing was he was congratulating himself that he didn't sell it at full price to somebody else, something that he thought was too dangerous, right? He didn't sell it at full price. He sold it at a discount, right? Does that make it ethical if you sell it at a discount? Well, I don't sell expensive crack and heroin. I sell discount crack and heroin. I'm a good guy, right? So, the important part about reselling stuff is, even if it appears to be a discount, right? The stories I have about Ramesh Nori getting a great deal, which I thought was a great deal for us, because we got rid of one guy who obviously has no ethics, and we got another good guy who wants to learn stuff. That's great. Good deal for me. Glad that's over. But the Ramesh Nori story of getting a great deal on something sold on the internet, that is really, 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 really rare. The most common story is people say, oh, I got this and I paid $4,000 for it. They bring it to a Corvair college and it's not even a good core motor anymore. Because the stuff the guy did to it internally, sandblasted cases internally, you know, stuff you can't fix, done on engines. But people bring it to Corvair colleges all the time and it's $4,000 just thrown away.
So the side truck, just taking it and throwing it away, my purpose
No, you
was to take it apart.
take it apart and look at it.
But, so what would be the next step to make sure that it's okay?
Okay, it has to be inspected, basically.
Right. I mean, can a shop do that?
What shop would you have do that?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like,
Sign up and come to a Corvair college. I'll take a look at it in person. If you have it here, I'll take a parking lot tour of it and we'll go look at
I
it.
don't have to.
But the trick is, there are plenty of guys, when I say what I just said to you,
Yeah, I understand.
their next step is, I'm going to go find my buddy Bob, who runs a speed shop in town, and he's going to look at it and tell me whether it's good. Bob even ever flown on an airliner before? No, but he knows motors really well, right? So why did the guy go there? Because he didn't want to find out he spent $4,000 for nothing, so he found a guy who agreed with him about it, right? I said, why didn't you, this is a true story. I said, why didn't you send it to me? And he said, well, you're kind of picky. I was thinking, like, picky when it comes to flying things is good, right? You know, so that's in a nutshell. What other questions we got to go on? Come on, somebody else come up with some question about the motor, its operation, anything you want.
Cleaning. Stay away from sandblasting, you said. What about the soda blast? Stay away from that too?
The reason why a lot of people talk about soda blasting, and I'm familiar with all processes of doing this stuff, plastic media, dry ice, all types of methodologies of cleaning things, vapor degreasing cabinets, things that would make people in California drop dead. You know, to me, when I go and look for a cleaning product, right, I had my nephew with me and I said, we're going to go find the best stuff. And he says, how do you know what it is? And I said, you go look for the label. And he said, there's a label that says this is the best stuff? And I was like, yes. You look on the back of the thing and it says, causes known to cause cancer in California. I was like, this is what we want. And my nephew was like, my God, Uncle Billy, like, this causes cancer. I was like, we're not in California. Right? So, in the methodology of cleaning things, there's a really greasy core motor out here. Young guy brought out here, right? The first thing is you take it, you put it in a plastic bin, Dawn dishwashing detergent, very hot water, plastic bristle brush. It'll take almost all the stuff off the outside. A lot of guys, I have a steam cleaner, and you can take a lot of stuff off of the steam cleaner, but it's an elaborate piece of equipment. And if you're just doing one motor, plastic bristle brush. At the very end, if you want to, you can use oven cleaner on aluminum parts. 5 minutes at the most on it, and then make sure you rinse it off really well. But a lot of the stuff of people saying, I'm going to use soda blasting, and I'm going to do this and everything. How many people have a catalog from Eastwood car restorations or have ever seen one before? Okay. Eastwood sells tools that people love to hear about. They sell home powder coating kits that almost work. They sell soda blasting stuff that's kind of okay, and all sorts of stuff. You know, you have two elbows, you know, they come with elbow grease, you know, Dawn dishwashing. It's not as elegant, you know, but I'm sure if it caught on with enough people, East would be like, Dawn dishwashing detergent kit from Eastwood. You know, so a lot of the stuff that people talk about as techniques and guys get caught up in stuff, you can get through that stuff and get that job done pretty quick with some basic methodologies. And so if you want it to like be particularly clean, that's the methodology most frequently used, is regular dishwashing detergent, plastic bristle brush, very hot water, followed up when it's just down to staining, and then you can get it with oven cleaner. Yes. Yeah. Can't leave it on for an hour. Some people say I want it to do a good job. It'll turn aluminum gray in a very spotty way. It's attacking it. But the oven cleaner, for the most part, in the first 5 minutes is going after any organic material on it. It will remove staining from aluminum. How many people have seen aluminum wheel cleaner before? Works pretty much the exact same way. And you got to rinse it off very quickly. But aluminum wheel cleaner, like Alumabrite, will work on engine cases also. But the goal is not to make them, the definition of clean is not visually clean. They always say to people come up to me at Cornbury Colleges, is it clean enough? And I always say, would you lick it and tell me if it has a taste in your mouth? Right? I wouldn't lick it. Then don't put it in your engine, right? So the lick test, if you'd be really hesitant to lick it because you don't think it's clean enough, then it's not clean enough for your engine. These are the standards. Clean enough to put in your body, but good Lord, there's a different standard for your engine. Otherwise, you're not a motorhead. Question?
Yeah, I went and looked at one engine. The lady had 3 of them, but one engine, the serial number there was no serial number on it. I kind of suspect it might be from a truck or a van, but I'm not sure.
Every engine, every van engine, every forward control, they all have serial numbers. Every motor has a serial number on it. The only motors that are different is they're all on the left-hand case half. The only ones that are in the right-hand case half start with the letter A, and they are the 1969 models. They only made 5,000 Corvairs out of 1.8 million. Only 5,000 were made in '69. So the odds of running into a '69 motor, I've seen a dozen of them in 30 years.
Well, I've seen one then.
Not if it had no number on it.
Well, it wasn't where it was.
It's an inch away from it. You were not looking in the correct location on the motor.
Okay.
Vans, everything, they all have letter codes on them.
I'm talking about intelligent choices in carburetors.
The choices in carburetors?
Intelligent choices.
Intelligent choices in carburetors. Okay. Intelligent choices in carburetors. I'm going to go to Oshkosh, and the first question that always comes up at Oshkosh with anybody is, does this come with fuel injection? And it's like, because I need a safe motor. Safe motors have ADS-B and they have fuel injection, right? Now, here's what we know about mechanical simplicity. You take a look at an airplane like a Pietenpol, ZS750, all kinds of airplanes have gravity-feed fuel systems. What is the pressure in a gravity-feed fuel system? It's head pressure, right? I don't even think it's 2 pounds. It might be 2 pounds if you have a really high-wing airplane. But gravity feed works. And let's compare a gravity feed system to an airplane that could have gravity feed but has electrical fuel injection in it, right? Now, everything you need to know about reliability is it needs to be at lower pressure, lower RPM, and lower temperature, and lower vibration. If you're moving in that direction, it is getting more and more reliable, and it has less parts, and I understand it better. You're headed towards like Nirvana, right? Headed in the other direction, like down the stairway to the hot place, is it's electrically dependent. If it gets a fuel leak, it'll be spraying out at 40 psi. It's got all kinds of wiring that goes to it. And you'll go through this whole thing and you say, it's gravity feed. And every Oshkosh has somebody that says, but what if that doesn't work? And I said, you have no fear if gravity quits working of the airplane landing very hard. You know? And people are like, why? More coffee for you. So all the stuff that I do is not because I don't know enough about electronic systems. I know an awful lot about electronic systems and fuel injection. We built all that stuff, and I built mechanically injected Corvairs, gone through all the stuff. Carburation is the right answer for all of the applications of a Corvair into a light airplane. It's not the right answer if you want to show off to buddies how much you know about electronic stuff, or show off to Mother Nature what you didn't know about electronic stuff, and let Mom Nature show you that one.
Which carburetor?
The correct carburetor, the most common carburetor on Corvairs is a Stromberg. The second most common carburetor is a Marvell Chevrolet MA3 SPA. Very, very common. Bob, you have a Stromberg? Bob has a Stromberg. Marvell, you have Marvells on both your Corvair-powered airplanes. Kevin, you're a Marvell. My own personal Corvair has a Marvell carbine.
Would the Marvell give you any better, like say, instead of burning 6, you burn 5.5, or is it
No,
atomize the
no,
same?
doesn't atomize fuel the same. The one advantage of Strombergs are they're a little bit less expensive, and they're a little bit more common. But the carburetor matters on the motor. I've done a lot of inspections. People rent airplanes, they fly to the Bahamas. And I've had a lot of people say, hey, I'm going to rent this airplane and I'm going to take it to the Bahamas. It's a 172 and it's great. I've been over there before. You got any time? I'm going to buy you dinner or whatever. I'm going to fly over there tomorrow and I rented it. Hey, could you go put an eyeball on it? And if I got 15 minutes to look at a 172 that's going to fly over the water, what are the two things I'm going to look at? The only two things I care about. You think I got to do a differential compression tester on 0320? No, don't care. We could have next to nothing in a cylinder. He'll still fly over the Bahamas. Right? What are the two things I'm looking for? Carburetor and the mags. If the guy's going to have trouble, he's going to have the trouble with the carburetor and the mags. I'm looking for a correct response when it's running. I want it to start cleanly. I want it to stop cleanly. I want to do the mag drop test. I want to try and aggravate it to behave poorly. If the carburetor and the mags work on a 172, and I got 15 minutes to look at it, that's what I'm going to focus on. Okay, how does this bear into your Corvair? A lot of guys say, well, I put $1,000 in paint on my airplane, and I did this and I did that, and I got the ADSB, and I'm looking at it, and when it came to the carburetor, they're like, my buddy had it, he said it was good, right? The first thing I want to look at on a Corvair-powered airplane is, what do you got for the carburetor? Now, in Roger Grable's case, he had one that was way too rich. Okay? But a MA3 is a wonderful, perfect carburetor, so is a Stromberg. When these things are set, they hold their adjustment really, really, really well. They're worth every dollar you spend on them. An overhauled Stromberg from a really first-class fuel system repair station, about $500. About $1,100 for an MA3 SPA. But these things work really, really well. So those are the two primary carburetors that I like. One of the things people come up and say, this makes a good airplane carburetor, and they're holding a Bing carburetor, right? What's the most common engine that uses a Bing carburetor? Well, the most common engine, aircraft-wise, is a Rotax engine uses a Bing carburetor, right? Jabiru engines use Bing carburetors. Who doesn't use a Bing carburetor on a Jabiru engine? Sonex. They order their Jabiru engines, and they rip the Bing carburetor off and toss it away. All right. Bing carburetor is. How many people have seen one in person? It's got this great thing called a constant velocity setup on it. It's got a diaphragm on the top. Do you know what happens to a Bing carburetor if you put the slightest amount of ram air pressure on it? You can have the throttle wide open, and it will shut the slide down for you. Okay, Bing carburetor. Do you know how the fuel line is held onto the carburetor? There's a little plastic clamp on it, on a little rubber fuel line going down to it. Right? You ever take a look at a Rotax 912 installation? It's got a little steel bowl under each carburetor and a drain line reading out the bottom. Because the Bing carburetors leak, they leak into that bowl, and it runs down and runs overboard instead of over the top of the hot engine. Okay? Fine German engineer. All right. So You know, Bing carburetor, a lot of people look at it and say, why is it on Rotax engines? They're both made in Austria. That's why. Why is it on a Jabiru engine? Because they were going to do what Rotax did, right? You can make better choices because Continentals and Lycomings use Strombergs and MA3s. And no matter what people say about Rotax have a good reputation with them, Lycomings have an incredibly good reputation with Marvell Shoveler carburetors. So you can't argue carburetor choices. If you want to argue like this Austrian engine had this, I'm going to argue Lycoming has this, and I want to use what Lycoming's using. Because my model of success is not Rotax, my model of success is Lycoming. What I'm trying to emulate is Lycoming's success record, which is a whole lot better than Rotax's. So one of the things I frequently say to people was, in the early 1980s, I put 3 solid years into motorcycle drag racing. Spent every dollar I had, was rapidly attached to motorcycle drag racing. How successful was I? I work in aviation today. Right? I gave that up and I went to Embry-Riddle after that, right? I put 3 years into it. This particular era of motorcycle drag racing was known as the nitrous wars, where every bike had nitrous on it. And bikes ran with carburetors then. And there were all kinds of carburetors and people tested them. You could go through every kind of carburetor you have ever heard of that could be possibly applied to an airplane, that was ever applied to a motorcycle. I have personal experience with it. And the personal experience I had with lots of stuff, you could go through how many people in drag racing, when you go for 1 round and you lose, you're done for the day. That's called being trailered. I got trailered so many times in my pursuit of a drag racing career that I used to keep track of how many people, you know, were good at this. Guys who spent more money, understood a little bit more than I did when I was in my early 20s. And I will tell you that I got trailered by guys with Mikuni smooth bores, 33 millimeters, 26 millimeter keyings, electron flat slide carburetors, you know, DeLordos, you know, every kind of carburetor in the world was on somebody's bike and beat me, right, and trailered me. I will tell you, the one carburetor I was never trailered by, never, was a Bing. Never. Like, how good could they be? How good could they be if no one ever used one to end my day in drag racing? Right? And people try, all right? I have a 100% success record using Mikunis to wipe out and trailer guys on Bings, but not the other way around. So Bing, not a great carburetor, but the important point of that story on carburation is that my methodology of what we're going to use on it is I'm going to use what Lycoming uses. My methodology of like decision making on it is, if I know that the most important thing to look at from a reliability standpoint of an airplane going into a serious flight environment like where you're going to take a swim, that I want to look at the carburetor, then when you're putting together your airplane should have, basically, if your airplane has a paint job that costs 6 times more than your carburetor, you're making bad decisions, right? So all of these things, and above all, then you can go at information that we share, like Terry's in the back there. We have the database of the Pete Bear group. All the information on there. Almost all the guys who are flying and having success, almost 100% of them are using Strombergs and Marvell Shovelers. So if you decide that that's what you're going to do, right, you can instantly tap into all the information that these guys have already pioneered for you, and you can utilize that. But I will still always run into people who say, well, I'm going to do something totally different, right? Hitachi makes pretty good motorcycle carburetors. A guy I know who's really, really smart on them said, I'm going to put one on my Corvair powered Sonics. And he put an awful lot of effort into that. And he put a really, really smart effort into it. And when he was done, he put an MA3 SPA on. And he admitted that he got his butt kicked by it. And it didn't, and that instantly the MA3 SPA worked perfectly fine what he had pursued. And at the end of it, he said, my ego told me that I wanted to be the guy who solved that puzzle. And he said, my ego was really strong when I was in the shop, but when I got in the airplane and everybody was standing outside with video cameras and I'm closing the latch, I suddenly got all sweaty and my ego didn't seem so smart anymore, right? and he didn't like testing it. And the truth is that a lot of stuff that when you're working on it in the shop or talking in the hangar with guys, that seems really smart. But the thing you have to do is project forward to the moment where it's just going to be you getting in the airplane. And the engine's going to be running and you're going to feel a little queasy and you're going to think, he's videotaping me. They're going to have a videotape of this. Oh, God. And so you got to project forward to that time and think, no, I wish I had something completely reliable. So there's enough to do to prove that you're a smart person. And how you're going to prove to be a smart person is you're going to utilize information that other people have pioneered. What percentage of home builds are finished? Do you know this by the original owners? Okay. What percent? Here. I'm a member of the industry, right? In the industry, we had a giant debate behind closed doors. And the giant debate behind closed doors was, let's come up with a number so we always answer that question the same way. And me being the smartass said, well, why don't we get some statistics on it and just honestly tell people what the statistics are? And people are like, God, no, we don't want to do that. We can have plausible deniability of how low the number is. Let's just come up with a number. The number they decided on, after like heated debate for hours, right? The number they decided on was 20%, right? And how many people ever met Jeremy Monette? Jeremy Monette was a friend of mine. Jeremy Monette and I stood there and looked across the table at the other group that was led by mostly Richard Van Grunsman and said, nobody's going to believe that number. 20% is a lie you can't sell, all right? Now the number's way lower than 20%, okay? So people are always looking, when they're looking at something like their Hitachi carburetor they want to do, or something special for their airplane, and they say, I want to be the guy who did this. That's their ego talking. And I said to each and every one of those people, if you want to be somebody really special in home building, really stand out, you can beat 9 out of 10 guys at this game if you just finish your airplane. You can be a top 10 percentile person if you just finish your airplane. And please tell me how your Hitachi carburetor is going to get you that much easier and closer to the finish line, and I will tell you that your Hitachi carburetor better keep you company while you're standing by the side of the flight line while your friends are going flying, all right? So, good decision making gets you to the point of that stuff, all right? Any other question that we got?
I got a motor that's pretty much disassembled.
Yes?
Down to the cage, but I got 2 lifters that just won't come out. It's a good method to get those guys out without destroying it.
The thing about lifters, if a lifter is in the bore, now all Corvair motors have hydraulic lifters. They use the same hydraulic lifter that a small block Chevy does. So the lifters are in the bore on the case half. If the lifter is stuck and doesn't fall right out, the most important thing to do with it is that you have to push it back into the case rather than out from the middle. You want it to go towards the crankshaft. You want to take the case half apart and you want that lifter to go inside. If the lifter doesn't come out of the case, the primary reason why it doesn't is that the lifter is worn and the cam was worn. And what it did was it put a little scuffed area, and the lifter is too big to go out of the case. But the lifter is never too big to go into the case. So you can take like a wooden broom handle, cut it off square, and make yourself a wooden dowel, and you can tap the lifter down, straight down into the case half, and have it come to the middle. If you need any coaxing on that, if you need any coaxing at all, you take a propane torch and you heat the area around the lifter, because the aluminum will expand faster than the steel does, and it will let go of it. But it could be varnished in place. You got to watch closely that it's not cocked in the bore. You know, take a look at it, make sure it's square, and then just tap it down. But it must go to the inside. And if you have more trouble, you send me pictures and we'll talk about it. Okay? Question?
What's the engine oil that you recommend? Over in Australia, it's not available. So what properties are you looking for in an engine oil?
Well, they make sealant containers.
No,
They make sea-land containers, and you load all your stuff, and you come here to the land where we have the oil, we have pocket knives and handguns. All right, come on, I gotta be mean. I ate dinner with him the other night. I'm allowed to tease him, you know. I'm just getting the jump on him, all right? Just getting the jump on him. The thing about it is, if you don't have the oil, what you're looking for is oil that has more than 800 parts per million of zinc in it. If it has more than 800 parts per million of zinc phosphate in it, it's perfectly fine. It doesn't really matter what brand it is. I prefer that it was a high temperature oil like Shell Rotella tea. If you can't find oil that has zinc phosphate in it, you can buy the additive from the US and we'll ship it over to you. Along with a knife with both blades longer than 30 centimeters.
They'll take that out.
What? I had emailed the importer and they said no.
Okay.
So this is why I have the engine home on the plane.
Any heavy-duty mineral oil in the engine will work pretty well. What we're looking for is the zinc phosphate content. And the zinc phosphate content is important, and you can get it with an additive and put that into the oil. The level that produces 800 parts per million of zinc phosphate in the additive is like 1 ounce per gallon will do it. You dose it higher than that when the engine's brand new, but when in operation, like CDDP, an 8-ounce bottle of that, if you split it in half and put it in 2 different oil changes, you would be operating above like 1,500 parts per million of zinc phosphate. Yeah. Okay?
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm just going to ask, Don Soap killed people in California? Is that how I was getting out of that?
Oven cleaner does.
You got to spray real close?
Yeah. No.
All right.
No. But yeah, that's these are the types of things that I tease people a little bit. Some people have a sense of humor. This is part of your. I can't take credit for this. I was mostly trained on how to tease people by Terry Hand, who's a master of this.
It's a gift.
It's a gift, but one you've worked with to develop and turn into an art form. The raw material is a gift. What you do with it can be an art form, right? So I tease people a bit, but truly there are answers for this stuff. And after we give them the answer, then we can tease them some more.
I'm from Florida. You can't hurt my feelings.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I've spent the last 35 years in Florida, and so we're pretty thick-skinned.
Yeah.
I tease people, about my northern friends who, I'm horrible in January. I take pictures of the green grass. I'm like, oh God, I had to mow the lawn today. And, we cooked these burgers outside, and they tasted great and everything. And here's my old snow shovel. I keep it around, and little kids around here ask me, "What is that, sir?" And the funny thing, true story. My family up in New Jersey. About 8 years ago, my dad, who was at the time 84, decided that he was going to go out and use the snowblower to snowblow the driveway. And when this was done, my brother was infuriated because Dad was just going to do stuff on his own. So we had the snowblower laying around. He fired it up, and obviously walking up and down a steep, icy driveway is not what you do in your 80s. But all of you guys who have an option as dad. Know this, that raising a dad is a very tough job. And so the funny thing to show you what horrible Florida sense of humor I have is that year when I came back from Oshkosh, my brother said, "You got your pickup truck. You're visiting mom and dad, throw the snowblower in the back of the pickup truck." He's like, "Take it away from the house. We're just gonna have somebody plow the driveway for them. No more snowblower at mom and dad's," right? So I put the snowblower in, and I'm driving south, and I'm thinking, like, I have Florida license plates on this. I have a snowblower.
Nothing going on.
And I thought, really, what can I do with this? Old worn out snowblower. I put it at the bottom of my driveway at the air park, right? And I put a sign on it that said, "Global warming is a myth. Prepare now, Florida." neighbors who didn't understand me before, they didn't get anything out of
Didn't
that.
help.
But, you know, some people, it was a good filter, because people who thought that was funny were people you want to have over for a cookout, and the people who were made uncomfortable by that.
You don't want them already
You
now.
don't want them already. Any other questions we got, Terry?
Yeah, I've had a couple people ask me about registering on the forum, so can I just make a quick pitch?
Stand up and say it loud, please.
A couple people have asked me about the forum, the Pete Bear forum. Come see me after if you want the website, or Mr. Google, if you put in Pete Bear, P-I-E-T-V-A-I-R, forum, it will take you to it. Here's really the three things that we ask. You are a builder or a flyer of a Pietenpol Four-Bear combination, or are committed to do so. You have bought the plans. You're not using the crappy copy that's floating around the internet. You've spent the money and bought them, and you have bought Williams' manual. That's all we ask. The other thing I do ask, and this is important, and I think this makes it a unique form to any of, or most others, is we require first name, last name is your username. We are a firm believer, William and I, when we set this up, that when guys sign in as pool builder, they don't tend to be as nice as they are when they say Terry Hand or William Wynne or whoever.
We'd be
And
bad
you know who
examples
this
of people
person
being
is.
nice on the internet. Wait.
And I'll tell you right now, if you register and give me a nickname or a username, I'm going to write you a nice letter back, an email, and say, I'm sorry, I cannot accept your registration at this time. On the first page, at the top in capital letters, I asked you to use your first name, last name, and I wrote it at the bottom. But somehow, you missed it. So I need your name. So just make it easier. Sign in. Your registration is your first name, last name. And I will send you an email back and just ask you those three questions. Are you a builder, flyer, or committed? You don't have to even start yet. But if you're committed to it, you have bought a set of the plans and you bought Williams' manual, we're happy to have you. I think you'll find it's a very informative group, and I would like it to become, and I think it is becoming, the repository of knowledge of the Pietenpol Four-Bear combination. If you got a question about the website, come see me after, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
If you're building a Pietenpol and you're pretty much going to decide that you want to use a Four-Bear as a power plant, this isn't just about how the engine is bolted on the front of the airplane. This is a database that covers all things like weight and balance, landing gear designs, all sorts of stuff, fuel systems. A lot of that data is all covered in the Pete Bear database. So it's all about, inclusively, all of the stuff to do with the whole airplane and the experience of building it, but it's done by people with real names, it's real answers. We screen the stuff carefully to make sure it's a logical and good decision. There's a lot of stuff to learn by example. There are people to meet and that you can then later meet and in person and get to know. It's just an important resource so that nobody ends up building something into their airplane that's an old wives' tale or an unsafe idea. So if you are in the group of people who are building a Pietenpol with a Four-Bear on it, I have a vested interest in that working out real well for you. So I can't take care of everybody. I did all the stuff on the weight and balance project years ago. I did it for all Pietenpols. I shared all the data that I had on that. I've shared all the stuff about how you should build cabane lines, what your fuel lines should look like, landing gear location. I have a lot of general information. After I stood on that soapbox for about 4 years, told everybody that, I figured everybody who was going to listen did, and everybody who was going to say, oh, I don't like the guy's haircut, I don't like people from Florida, I don't like this, I don't like that. People who never learned the lesson of, you don't have to like me to learn something from me. We were done with that, and currently, all the information that I share with people and all the stuff that we do with Pietenpols in detail, that's useful builder detail, occurs on that database. So if you want to be a part of that, you don't have to own a Four-Bear motor right now. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to have built a rudder. You don't have to do any of that. You go see Terry and you talk about it, and he'll get you set up on it. The one good thing about being set up on it, as Terry pointed out, is it doesn't have any mystery people on it. It doesn't have people being snotty and surly to each other. It doesn't have any of that stuff. It's just raw information provided in a setting of camaraderie. So if you're building the combination, go see Terry after we're done here. What's the time look like?
4:45.
Okay. I'm going to take one more question, and then we'll take a break from this. If after the one more question, I'm going to walk out to the parking lot out here. There's a Corvair core motor. If you've never seen a Corvair taken apart, and you want to see what one looks like on the inside, we got one right out in the parking lot. All sorts of stuff is available. It's inexpensive to get started. If you want to buy a conversion manual from me, I have plenty of them. If you want to talk about detailed parts, if you want to look at any of the stuff, I'm here for the rest of the evening. So the whole thing is, if you decide that you want to build something, and that you were in this to find out how much you can learn, not how little, welcome to the club. One last question from anybody?
What spark plug do you recommend?
This spark plug that we use over time was always an R44 AC plug. In the last couple of years, now this is going to be the third year that we have switched spark plugs to 3 different varieties of Densos. And the 3 different varieties depend if you're building a 2700, a 3-liter, or a 3.3-liter Corvair. What we're doing differently with the Denso spark plug is the Denso spark plug is significantly colder, but it's an iridium plug, and it resists fouling really well. The only reason why you wouldn't run an incredibly cold spark plug in an engine, particularly an air-cooled one, is you might foul it. But the iridium resists fouling, and colder spark plugs are a very important margin against detonation in engines. So we have a modern spark plug recommendation. Even though Dan Weisman and myself have been beating this drum relentlessly for 3 years, telling people, your motor works, it's great. It's time to go to Denso spark plugs because it will add an extra margin of detonation against detonation. One day, the 93 octane gas you're putting in there that works great, somebody at the pump might have filled it up with 87. If you have a colder spark plug, it will survive that. If you don't, it'll detonate on it. So it gives you some freedom from a mistake. If you have a really hot day, and for some reason you got the carburetor heat on, you want to do a go-around, right? R44 can be antagonized into detonating under those circumstances. But a Denso IWF-20 cannot. And we tested that extensively. So I want guys to do that. Kevin and Shelley hosted Corvair College in Texas last September. We were there. Guy flew in a Corvair powered Panther. Has R44 plugs in it. Right? I said, good thing you flew here and I got a toolbox. We're going to change your spark plugs for you today. And what he said, which was pretty bold, because Dan's a pretty big guy, and he's from Florida, and Florida guys, you know, when they run out of words, you got 2 things left to talk to people with, right? Part of Southern culture, right? So he said to Dan, well, if they were good enough once, why aren't they good enough now? And I thought, boy, you have great insurance to talk to Dan Weisman that way when he's hot and tired, right? But the point was that I made to him was, how many people here have ever owned a certified airplane? Okay. You have ADs on certified airplanes. ADs have a date on them, right? If you said to the FAA, I'm going to comply with ADs, but no ADs after, say, 1980, because if it ran good enough in 1980, that's fine. I don't have to comply with any AD. Which is the same thing the guy's saying, which is, if you used R44s for years, and they worked then, why would I have to take advantage of any research and testing that you do? Why would I have to make it any better?
Well, you know, Densos are incredibly expensive, like $2 or $3 a piece.
They are. They are. So there's the financial reason not to go. An AC plug is about $1.47, and I'm not going to lie to you, Densos are coming up on twice that. But nobody said aviation was going to be cheap. We're going to lose some people who can't afford it. Couldn't bring everybody along. Feel bad about it. You're gonna lose some guys. When you go from $1.50 for a spark plug to like $3, you're gonna lose people. That's how it is. But you can't compromise on it. All right.
Thank you.
All right.